A couple of days ago, I put together a YouTube short, and I was asking the question, what's the difference between honesty and transparency? And I attempted an answer of the critical difference. I wanted to pose that question because I think for so many of us, we would almost consider those two in similar, almost synonymous contexts. Synonymous meaning that they're both meaning the same thing. Honesty, transparency. They can kind of be defined the same way, I think, is how most of us would answer. And I wanted to sort of think through that and find out the nuances. What are the distinguishing differences between honesty and transparency? I think there are some different notes that they do play, even though they play very well together. They play very well. They actually support each other really well. Today I'm going to make another short, I think, later on. And the question I'm going to give you a preview is, is it possible to have honesty without transparency? Or is it possible to have transparency without honesty? So consider that even while we engage in exploring these two in our conversation today. But there are differences between honesty and transparency. Even though they seem so congruent and synonymous, they aren't the same thing, I don't think. Honesty is really about telling the truth. Transparency is about being open and clear about one's actions and decisions and their intentions. So whereas honesty is more about being truthful or truthfulness, transparency simply is more about being open in one's process and providing a lot of clarity as to the why. So consider that while you ponder the question I'll pose a little bit later today, and that is it possible to have honesty without transparency, or is it possible to have transparency without honesty? So consider that, and I'll share my thoughts later. An example may be, now one could choose to be honest about their intentions, but they may not be transparent about sharing how they're going to achieve their plans or their intentions. So they could have every intention of being honest, but they may not communicate about it and be open and clear about how they're going to go about doing it. It's possible for one to be transparent, but in being transparent, I would say that honesty is already baked in. It's already like part of that package, because in being transparent, you're just going further than being honest about what your intentions are to actually talking about them and saying, here's what my plans are, here's how I'm going to achieve them, etc. And I'll give you a couple of examples through the course of this conversation here. But why are we talking about transparency in the first place, or even honesty? But transparency is the specific commitment of our time together today. I did talk about honesty I think this was about last week this time. So just go back and check, and I'll see if I can maybe put a card somewhere up here with reference to that conversation. But why are we talking about transparency? I think we're having this conversation at a critical point in our experience of humanity in this world, because there is an abundance. Actually, abundance is not the right word to use. I would say there is a plague. There's a plague, a significant worldwide plague of dishonesty, of deceit, and I think we all know that. I think we all know that there's a lot of crappy things going on in this world because of the choices we as humans make and the commitments and the decisions that are made all around the world. There isn't a sense of abundance in the transparency category. There isn't a sense of ripeness when it comes to honesty being on display. From politics to business to personal engagements, there is this vacuum. There is a sense in which we see ourselves navigating through this life of ours with a sense of, how do I protect myself? How do I look after myself? How do I make sure that I don't go under? How do I make sure I'm protecting me in the midst of engaging and interacting with others? So I would say that we are at a time in our existence of humanity where there is a significant plague that is way more extensive than some of the most deadly diseases and things. And that plague has to do with our capacity to engage dishonestly and with deceit. And so that's why we're talking about transparency. Of course, we could talk about it in simplific terms, saying, hey, all we have to do is not be dishonest. But it goes a little further than that, because I think we have to sort of dive into a bit more of why this is such an issue. But for us specifically as young men who want to make our mark in this world, there are a couple of options, I think. There are a couple of options whereby you can progress in this life with this sense of fitting in and doing just like everyone else is doing, just to get by. Or there is the option of being courageous and standing against the tide of much of what we see to be different and to propose something different, especially in the way that we engage. And that's why I am focusing specifically on this topic of transparency and the need for it, the essential need for it, especially amongst young men today who have a desire to walk with integrity. I don't think you'd be listening this far into this conversation if integrity wasn't something you were interested in. So the very fact that you are interested and being here on purpose to say, this is important for me and I want to figure out how to do this better, is a huge commendation to you. Hats off to you for even spending the time. I'm not even thanking you for being here and listening. No. I'm acknowledging that you're doing this for you, and you're doing it from intentions that you want to see progress in how you become a better version of you, despite the tempting offers that the world has for those who cut corners and who try to take the short path towards achieving their goals, regardless of walking with integrity. It takes a lot more work for us who are saying, no, there's something important here that we want to capitalize on when we apply ourselves to walking with integrity. And it's so all-encompassing, isn't it? When we make the decision to pursue walking with integrity, it's not like we can change the game. It's not like we can sort of cheat on some parts of the game and be on point on others and following the process that it leads us through. It's the kind of commitment that takes everything. It doesn't leave anything really for you to do your way. It says, no, if you're going to walk with me, this is what integrity would be saying if integrity were talking to you personally. She, and I'm calling her a she because why not? She would be saying, I want everything. And the point at which you refuse to yield to me, that's the very point that I'm going to put my finger on and say, I want that. I want my expression to be infused in your whole being, from the way you think to the way you feel to the way you engage and act. Integrity asks for everything. And so it's remarkable in a wonderful way that you, my dear listener, are still here in this community, listening to these conversations, participating in it, and also applying yourself to it, because there isn't much of this in the world today. And that's why I think you and I are here, is we want to make a difference. We want to make a difference without cutting corners when it comes to how we grow, how we evolve, how we develop to something more of what could be. So I'm really grateful for you being here. But I'm not saying thank you for being here for me. No, I'm saying thank you for being here for you. And thank you for encouraging me with solidarity in our commitment to pursuing this walk with integrity, especially in all these prerequisites that it hones in and challenges us with. And today we're talking, like I said, about transparency and how essential it is, especially for those who desire to walk with integrity. It's just part of the package, and that's why we have it in this series of prerequisites for walking with integrity. The desire for transparency is a driving force for young men to be open and clear about their intentions and decisions. Just again, giving you a bit of my response to the question I posed earlier and that I will pose later. Can you have honesty without transparency? Yes, I think you can. You can be honest about the way you're committing to something and still not communicate about how you're going to do it by being clear and open about it. Can you be transparent without honesty? I don't think so. I think the starting prerequisite for transparency is honesty. First of all, there needs to be honest intentions internally. And then that moves into the transparency zone where you can communicate about it and say, here's what my plans are. And so I still also remember what that was like when I made my last significant decision towards transparency. Quick story. I came across this concept of transparency in my mid-20s. Now, quick recap here. I had my first romantic relationship ever when I was 28 years old. For the longest time, I just lacked the courage to be able to express interest in the many, many girls that I met along the way that I really wanted to connect with romantically, but I never had the know-how. And then in my 20s, like my mid-20s, I started reading some books on relationships and how you can do relationships really well. And as I was reading those books, this idea of transparency came to my awareness. And I said, what a fantastic concept that one can be open and clear about their intentions and communicate that, especially in the happy setting where the one that they're engaging and interacting with accepts them. You can be open and clear. And for me, that meant being open and clear about all my shameful past that I was struggling with at this time. That I was like, I hope no one ever finds out about this. But when I had this idea that I can be open and clear about where I've been and tell everything and show my intentions and going forward about how I wanted to be a better man. That was like a mind-blowing thought. And so I began to want and long for this experience that I'd never thought I don't think I'd ever had access to. I'd never been able to have that experience where I could share myself that way with someone. And so I thought, this is significant. I wanted to know a little bit more about what this here feels like. And so that was huge for me. And as I embarked on this first relationship at 28, I was excited that here I could probably connect with this person who was going to know all about me. And then my commitment was I was going to be transparent with this person and be open and clear about everything before we got married. At the critical moments that I had worked up courage to doing so before we got married, I balked. I all of a sudden freaked out internally saying, "Oh, I can't follow through on this. This is really scary." And so I didn't. And in that moment, I remember a significant sense of sadness because this thing that I really had longed for, now I saw melting away, and I thought I'd never have access to it, that I could never be open and clear with this person I really cared for. And I really wanted to be known. I wanted to be known for who I was, my messiness and all. I wanted to be loved for who I was. And so I saw that melt away, and I went on a few more years painfully in this zone where I just was dead inside. I was dead in the sense that I still did not know how to be open and transparent. I didn't find safety in my world to be able to express that. And then when I finally made that decision again, for the last time, that was like some 7 years ago maybe, when I finally was true and honest, and I was transparent, I was open and clear about where I'd been and what I'd done. And it was devastating for so many people close to me, so much loss there, so much loss as a result of lacking integrity. But I followed through on it this time. I could have had the option of continuing as I was and having all my world around me, from my family to friends and all the community, without transparency. But I I had this tremendous longing, dear listener, that I wanted to be known for who I truly was. And I wanted to be able to experience transparency by being open and clear about here's who I am and what I'm about and what my intentions are. And so when I did that, I lost everything then, but I've been in this pursuit of walking with integrity for some years now, and I've gained so much. I've lost significantly, I've lost some beautiful things there, but even now I'm in a far better place. There's this desire that I had. It was a driving force for me as a young man then to be open and clear with my decisions, with my intentions, with my thought process, with my feelings. And so I would say it's this sense that I believe all of us have, that we would be that we would be known and accepted for who we are, that we could feel safe to express and say, here's what it means to be me right now. And I know that someone knows, even though it's not nice, even though it's not pretty, it's messy, but someone still knows and accepts me for that. That's, I think, what our desire is. And as we desire that sense of being known for who we truly are, I think the part that we struggle with, and I know I did, is that we want to be known, but we don't want to be rejected. We want to be known, but we don't want to be attacked. We want to be known, but we don't want to be judged. Like there's this fearful factor over here that makes it daunting for us to choose this path of transparency on our way to integrity. And that's the tough part. We can't control the response or the reception of how we are going to be received after we share transparency. And that's a scary proposition for many. But you see, transparency is also like a form of accountability. For one, because as they're open and honest, and as they express and be clear about their actions and their thoughts and so on, as they communicate all that, like I said, you're not guaranteed what the outcome is or the response is, but it's a form of accountability. And as you apply yourself to this, you're basically putting yourself on display, and you're making yourself available to those who are like, I have a different take of how this should or could have gone. And so they can apply their own 2 bits to that. And that can be uncomfortable and scary, but that's really an important part. It's like a willingness to take the responsibility for our actions, our mistakes, being open to feedback and criticism. That's all part of the fare of what happens when we apply ourselves to walking with transparency. I don't know if you remember this experience. Some of you might, though. It's an experience where in math class, at some point, the teacher back in my day would say, the answer only gets you part marks. What they're more interested in is seeing the process of how you got there. Once upon a time, I could do division and I could just memorize what the answer was and just write the answer down and got full marks for that. But at some point, the teachers had some different commitments in their teaching, and what they communicated was they were saying, not only do we want the answer, but we want to see how you got to the answer. There's many ways. Show us how you got the answer. And the phrase that was often used was show your work. If you're just writing the answer, they'd write show your work, and you'd miss part marks for all that was entailed in that. They wanted to see your process for how you got there. And I bring that analogy up because in this is part of what transparency entails. It means show your work, communicate about your intentions, communicate about the decisions, communicate about why you're taking this way. So let me give you an example. Let's say I'm at work. Let me use myself. Excuse me. Let's say I'm at work and I am tasked with a project. We need this project done by this time. And I say, okay, I'll do that project. And I have a deadline, say it's 2 days. Get this work done within 2 days. And I'll be like, great. And then maybe they don't know me well enough, so they may ask, saying, tell us how you're planning to get this job done. And I say, don't worry about it. My intention is I'll get it done. That's honesty. It's honesty saying, I'm going to get the job done and I'm going to do it. But that is only part more exterior, because it's just saying, I got the job. I got this. I can do the job, without actually telling how you're going to do it. What would exemplify transparency in this scenario is if I were to say, oh, you'd like to know how I'm going to get this job done. Let me tell you. I'm going to get the job done, but this is the process in which I'm going to do it. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z according to this time frame that will enable me to get the job done on time. That's transparency. What does that look like for us in our personal relationships? Let's say, young man, you are in a relationship romantically, and your girlfriend is really frustrated with you because, let's say, because you are always late. Let's say you're habitually late, and they're frustrated, which is usually the reverse, because usually, stereotypically, as I understand it, it's women who take longer to get ready. But let's say for this example, it's the guy who is habitually late, and his girlfriend is frustrated, saying, well, you're always late. And so you say, oh, don't worry, I will be on time next time. And she looks at you and says, but how are you going to do it? I don't see it. Like, I know you're telling me that you're going to apply yourself, but I don't know how. And so you're telling your honest truth when you say, I'll be there on time next time. And then she may need some more intel. She may want some more transparency. She may want you to show your work. And she may say, but how are you going to show up on time when you've been late every time these last 2 years we've been together? Tell me, what's your process? In which case you have the opportunity to show transparency. Lack of transparency would be like the response that says, don't sweat it. I got it. You don't have to know I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Just know that. That's lack of transparency. Whereas transparency would be, oh, let me show you my process. I'm going to set my alarm clocks 6 alarms ahead of time, like six alarms that are going to be before this time frame, so that I can see it coming. I'm going to get ready and do all the things I need to do to get ready at this sequential time, and then I'm gonna apply and implement these plans so that I can get there on time. And that's an example of what transparency could look like. So transparency is definitely a form of accountability for one's actions and their process. It helps to build that sense of credibility and taking responsibility for your actions. But let me just pause for a moment here, men, and say that as I'm encouraging you to walk with integrity, especially by exemplifying and displaying transparency, it's not an easy thing. A lot of what I'm suggesting here seems simple, but I'm not trying to make it simplistic. This is actually a really courageous evolution on your part. When you choose to walk with transparency, it takes courage to do so. It takes courage to consistently apply yourself to walking with transparency. And this is going to require on your part some vulnerability, especially vulnerability to share what your thoughts are. When your friends or your significant other will say, what's on your mind? And you don't feel like you want to share it because you don't feel safe to. This is where transparency has an opportunity to be able to start being practiced. So the vulnerability to share what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what your intentions are openly, that's kind of scary ground for so many, where they're like, ooh, I'm not sure I can go there. I'm not sure I can offer this because this does not feel safe. And so we've learned to reflexively kind of shut ourselves off and be inaccessible. Transparency is really about being open and making oneself available by explaining as much as I can. In essence, it's like showing your cards. In a card game, you're supposed to hide your cards and make sure no one sees, and that's your advantage. But in this game here that we're playing with transparency, we're actually showing our cards, because in doing so, others can see our intentions and we can have some more meaningful connections resulting. It involves being willing to face consequences of our actions, even when they're unfavorable. When we are transparent, we're saying, hey, here's what it looks like on my side here. That's not an easy thing. That's going to require some significant courage, but kudos for you who step into that. The courage to put oneself or to expose oneself where we can grow character-wise. That's huge. That's really huge. And it's not an easy thing. It's easier said than done. That's why I'm saying that. And perhaps for you, as you're listening, you're like, I'm not sure I have what it takes to actually do that. That seems really daunting. And so what would I say to you who are desiring to see what this looks like for yourself, who aren't sure you have the necessary courage to do this? Like, what can I say to you that might encourage you? Here's what I would say to you. Start small. Start small. Start small by way of, well, honesty is a really important starting point. We said that's a prerequisite for transparency. So let's presume that honesty or telling your truth is in check, but we're struggling with transparency. Well, my suggestion would be, as you're interacting with those that you're wanting to be transparent with, it'd be something along the lines of saying, okay, how can I now give as much as I can in this moment? And it requires being aware of that, being aware of saying, okay, how can I offer what is beginning for them to know my process? And that is even by initially starting off and saying, I want to be transparent. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. So please be patient. That's a great starting point, because there now you're showing your process. You're saying, here's where I want to go. It's going to take me some time, but could you just be patient? That's a beautiful starting place. That's a very mindful starting place. And from there, you just continue to work in small increments, saying, okay, what do I want to say or reveal in this moment here? How can I be open and clear in this moment about what I'm thinking and feeling and where I want to go? And it's just those small incremental practicing progressions that enables you to move into that space of experiencing transparency. I'm not asking you to take a deep dive right away and say, like, here's what. No. Let's start off with a more reasonable expectation of small bite-sized chunks right now. And it just starts off even by communicating that initial step, saying, I want to walk with transparency right now, but I'm still learning my way through it. Would you just grant me some patience while I figure this out? Because it's a new zone for me and I want to grow in it. And that's a great place. What you've just done there is you're being transparent about your process. And then you can start reflecting on, what is it I'm trying to accomplish, especially in my expression of honesty? What is it that these individuals I'm interacting with need to hear from me? What is it that I can be open and clear about with them, about what my thinking, my feelings, like all of that gamut there is? And that's probably a really helpful starting place, I would suggest. If you are wanting to progress from there and say, Biniam, I've got that part down, like what's next? Drop me a line down below and I'll happily respond when I'm able to get to your comment about how to progress through that. That's something I like investing and spending my time doing, is helping others to increase in their ability and their experience of what could be. But transparency, I'm hoping that as a result of this conversation, you're starting to see the necessity of it, the way it plays well with honesty, but the way they're different as well too. The challenge that is involved, the courage that it necessitates when you're considering walking with transparency. It's not for the faint of heart. But that's why we have this community here, whereby we can encourage each other towards what could be, where we can spell it out in different ways. Maybe there's someone else in this community here who can speak to your experience because they have a different way of explaining it. This is why we do what we do here. And so I'd encourage you, if you haven't already done so, I'd love for you to subscribe and to be a part of this channel and to walk alongside me and others as we commit ourselves to experiencing integrity through these prerequisites that we're addressing. And today's was transparency, this beautiful element. And the subtitle I had for this was transparency, honesty that doesn't have to hide, or something similar. I'm trying to remember what I said there, but something along those lines where you can express and communicate. So I would love to facilitate that. In the meantime, though, let me encourage you a little further in saying this walk with integrity, worthwhile. And I'm glad that you're still here at the end of this conversation. It just shows that you're serious about what this looks like for you. And I'd love to hear your progressions in it, because the reason I'm doing this is to encourage and inspire others towards what could be. And I'm still pursuing. I'm still in the game. I hope you're going to join me in it. Until our next video, I hope you have a really productive day, especially as you hone in on integrity and how you want to experience that for you. We'll chat soon. Bye.